Hi there once again and welcome to tutorial number 7. Our objective here is to make our text move up the screen to a certain level based upon the positions of the snakes once they've come across the finish line of our race. So first we'll be raising to the highest position, fifth the lowest, and the others will all be somewhere in between. In order to achieve this, the expression that we're going to use is basically identical or practically identical to the expression that we've used to move the snakes from A to B, with one important difference really, and that's that once again we're going to be using an advanced feature of the Range Mapper node in order to make this possible. So that's our objective. Before we get into the Expresso, the first thing to take a look at is the typeface that I've now got here with regard to the position text here. It's something a bit bolder and a bit different. I just wanted to change that. Also, we've got our results here grouped into a slither results null object here. And that's important because the reason I've done that, if I click upon this and we go into our side view, we've got these positioned in the slither results there, and the y-axis is 100 centimeters, so they're 100 centimeters above our snakes. But the important thing, if I just click on SID's result here, is that their individual y-axes are 0. So they're working from a 0 point, of course, because they're parented, or perhaps we should say they're the children of the slither results null. So that, of course, allows us to have a position of 0, provided they're occupying the same position along the y-axis as the object that they're parented into, and that makes life a lot easier when we come to work with the Range Mapper. So that's precisely why I've done that, and it's always worth working from a null object. So that's a little bit of information there. We just open SID here and just click on the text. All I've done, I've changed the font to Impact because I just felt that it was bolder font. It looked really nice, but it's entirely up to you which font you use. I've also increased the height from 50 to 80 centimeters, and that's all I've done. I've not touched any of the other parameters in here. That's the only change, or they're the only changes that I've made. So that's that little bit of it dealt with there. If I just switch to my top view, obviously the most important thing to do is place the text in the most sensible position, which along the z-axis is going to be somewhere around the center of each of the snakes. And then I suppose it's approximately, well, just over halfway towards the tail end of the snake is where I've placed the beginning of each of the text objects there, because obviously the text is different along the x-axis in terms of its dimensions depending on the position that each snake has actually finished in. So that's the only change I've made there. Just wanted to tidy that up a little bit. Okay, so I think we're ready to have a little bit of a look at the Expresso expression and get that underway. So I'm going to double click on here to open this up. So what we're going to do, our first port of call actually, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to get a hold of, I should probably just go in here actually, just frame those first and then frame selected. The time node is the first node that needs some work on it. I also need, along with the frames, I do need a time output port, and you'll see why a little bit later. So I've got that sorted out and that's prepared. Let's go back to frame all. And where I'm going to work, as per usual, I've got to make 5 expressions or 5 extensions to the expression that will all be exactly the same, so they've got to be copied and pasted in. So I'll work with SID as I did with the green sphere before, and we'll do it in there, and then I'll stop the tutorial while I cut and paste. So that's how I'm going to work here. Okay, so if I just select these here and I can frame the selected again, just zoom it out a little bit to give us some space to work with. First port of call is to get another condition node exactly the same as this one. So I need that there. The only thing that I need to do is change its data type to real. So I'll get that done. And then I've got to put some numbers in here which are going to be used a little bit later. So I'll tap those in and then I'll explain why I've done what I've done in a moment. So I've got those in there. That's the first bit. Next on the agenda is to get a monoflop node, because as I said, this is going to be very, very similar to what we did before. But what I'm going to do here, I'm just going to come across and frame all once again. And I'm going to place my monoflop node near the time node because it's got to be plumbed into that first. So let's just go and get my monoflop, put it somewhere near the time node, frame all of those, frame selected, and I can now grab a hold of the output from the time node and put that in there, and that's ready to go. Just undo that, don't want to do that, move that a bit, and then I can frame all again, grab a hold of my monoflop and put it in position somewhere over here, select those again and frame selected, take it back a bit, okay, go a bit further. So that's the first little bit of that done. The next thing to worry about, the condition here is again going to be used to switch this condition, because as before we're interested in working with the positions. The snakes have finished the racing, so all of this is going to be important to actually switch these to the correct values. So that's the first two little parts of it done. The trigger for this monoflop here is going to be taken from the output of this existing NOT node. Now, one important difference, just make that slightly smaller, the one important difference here from the expression that we had before, when we did this previously, we set the monoflop node to one-shot mode because we wanted it to be triggered by a 1. That was very important. It wanted to be triggered by a true output from a compare node. On this occasion, the NOT starts with a 1 at the output and changes to a 0. So we need to leave the monoflop in normal mode for it to work on this occasion. So that's an important difference there. The duration needs to be 15 frames. And also we need to add a state because we're going to use that with the range mapper. Moving on from here, the next thing I need is a multiply node. So I need a math node rather, and it needs to be set to multiply. Okay, and then the output of this we can plug into the input there, and in the second input we're going to put 80. So what we're going to do is multiply these values by 80. So now I can explain to you how this is going to work. So for example, if SID came first, we would output from here a number 4 because we know we've got a number 4 set up in input 1 here. So that's going to switch us to input number 6 here because it's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that will switch us to input 6. So we want the text for first to rise to the highest position. So we've got a 5 in there. We're going to multiply 5 by 80 to get 400. So it's going to leap up the screen to 400 centimeters. However, if SID had come 5th, we'd be getting a value of 3 returned from our condition node at the output. So with a 3 at the output, we're going to select the input here, which is input number 5. Because he's 5th, we've got a 1 in there, so he's at the lowest position. So 1 times 80 is 80. So that's how this is going to work, and you can see that the other values are going to be multiplied by 80, and they're going to give us the values, or the heights I should say, between the 1st and the 5th positions. The next thing we need to do is to get a range mapper node in here. So we'll go down to calculate range mapper and bring one of those in. We now need to add an output upper, and that's one of the advanced features of the range mapper. You can choose output lower, you've got input lower as well, so you can choose what you're feeding into this. It's not set in stone because you just do something at the input. You can actually say, I want this to be a variable rather than a constant. So what we're going to do is feed this value that comes out of this multiply node, having been worked with between these two, into the output upper. So we're going to go from 0 to whatever is coming out of here based upon what's coming out of here. So that's important. The state, as per usual, we're going to plug into there. So we're going from 0 to 1 and then from 0 at the output stage to whatever is coming out of there, as I've said before. So that's how that's going to work. So we've created a variable at the output stage. And that completes that little bit. As before with this particular expression, we need two conditions. So we'll get one and then copy the other one. In our first condition, we need a 0 in input 2, and we need the output of the range mapper plugged into there. Or rather, I should say the output of the multiply plugged into there, because this is the condition that fixes the text at the start and end points. The output, or rather the switch of this condition, is going to be controlled by the compare node, which I need to illustrate. If I frame all again, I'm going to pick this up and I'm going to drag it over here. We just frame, it's got frame selected, I've got to go with that, frame selected, get that in there. This compare node is the compare node that's going to trigger this condition. So that's going to be the one that's going to switch this condition. Once we've got to the end of the race, we know that we're going to need our end position selected. When we're at the start, obviously, then we need to switch back because the text will need to be at its initial position of 0 at the beginning of the race. So that's why we're setting that up as it is. Let's just go back to frame all, grab a hold of that and bring it back in here. Frame those. Now our second condition, we're going to switch via the output of the monoflop as we did before. So we've got those two in there. So when the monoflop is triggered, we want to be using the output from the range mapper. When it's idle, we want to be using the output from the first condition in there. So that's got that set up as needs be. The final part of the expression is simply to bring in SID result, drop it in here, go into coordinates, position Y, and plumb that in there. Just make that a little bigger so that we can see what we're doing. And that is the expression complete. So to recap, what we're doing, based on our positions, we're switching our condition. Once we've switched our condition, we're multiplying the result that's passed to the output stage here by 80, feeding it into the output upper of our range mapper. So we go from 0 at the output lower there to whatever this value is that's being fed into the output upper, a value between 80 and 400 in steps of 80. Obviously the monoflop is going to be triggered once the race has ended. That will be triggered. We'll then switch to using the range mapper because we're switching this second condition via the output or the out of the monoflop there. The first condition, as before with the snakes, it's switched to our start position when we're at the beginning of the race, our end position based upon what's coming out of the multiply node here at the end of the race, and we'll then pass these values to the position Y of SID result. So that completes the expression. Let's see if it works. It does, because we've already got SID's position there, but we didn't see that happen. Let's see if we can see the animation. and up it goes. It's not particularly interesting though at the moment, is it? It's a little bit sort of linear in its motion. And up it goes to the top. You can see that the changes are there, so the expression is working. Now, with it being just a sort of little bit linear, it doesn't look particularly interesting, so we can change that. If we go into the range mapper here, and we go into our spline, what we'll do, we'll put a couple of points in there, one there, drag that one up to the top, make sure this one's down at the bottom there. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to basically create an acceleration curve of this type. So it's going to start really fast and then ease in. So that's the sort of curve I think I created before. Somewhere around like that should give you quite a nice result. So let's see what that does. It should make it a little bit more interesting and a bit more dynamic, I think. There we go. Yes, so it starts quick and then eases in. That's exactly what we want it to do. See if we can get a first, because it'll really shoot up the screen then. Well, we got a third, but you can see that it's much better than it was. It's lost that sort of linear motion, and it's given it a sort of more dynamic feel and perhaps a more sort of cartoon type feel in a way. Certainly good for a video game anyway. Come on, Sid, you can win. No, you can't. Second, well, but you can see the result anyway. It's certainly improved things. Well, that's just about the end of tutorial number 7. So we've now got some text done. What I'll do, I said I would stop the tutorial here and copy and paste all of this over into the other snakes, and that's exactly what I'll do, and then I'll show you the end result. But that's literally completes this part of the expression. So I'll just stop it there and I'll be back with the finished result. Okay, welcome back. So I've got everything plumbed in. All the expressions are here, just added to as I've done before. All working. I've just tested it out and I'm going to show you the result in just a moment. So that's how the expression is looking at this moment in time. So without further ado, let's have a look at the result. Then our snakes race across the screen. And the text leaps up beautifully. And I think once you see all of them, all of those text objects leap up, you can see the dynamics that's really given it by doing the change or making the change to the spline in the range mapper node there. It's well worth doing because it really does add a good sort of feeling to it. But yeah, it all works quite nicely. That just about completes this last, look at that, beautiful. That just about completes this tutorial. So I hope you've enjoyed this one once again, and we'll move on to our next one. And in the next tutorial we're going to start looking at the scoring system for this, and that's when things start to get very, very complex and very, very interesting indeed. Not so much initially, but in the later stages certainly, once we start programming the scoreboard to recognize every different scenario that's possible. Okay, but anyway, that's what we're going to be doing, and I'll see you there very, very soon.